Sometimes when writing a program, you'll need to convert a value to a different data type. And that's what the cast operator is used for. And here's the basic syntax. You have the type that you want to convert to in parentheses and whatever expression you have. So say you have a variable called interest that stores bank account's interest as a double. And you'd like to extract the dollars portion of this and store it in a variable named interest in dollars. To do that, you'll use the cast operator like this. Here you can see the int as the cast operator. And the compiler will be more than happy to take the decimal portion of whatever's in interest and store it in interest in dollars. And remember that it's going to just truncate the decimal. It's not going to do any rounding. You can also use the cast operator to convert multiple values using parentheses. So just like before, we had our interest rate, but here you can see that the cast operator is applying to everything that's inside of the parentheses. So this will be evaluated first. What's inside the parentheses will be evaluated first, and then it will get converted to a double. So order of operations is important. Parentheses first, then the cast. Another important variable type to understand is the char variable type. So what is a char? Well, a char is a variable that holds a single character. So for example, you might use it to store B6 or a colon. So these are all examples of chars, and they have a specific ASCII value, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But here's an example of some code that you could compile and run. So we are declaring char first, middle, and last. And then we are assigning M to first, L to middle, and K to last. And then we are concatenating a string with these three char variables here, here, and here. So this would be a good place for you to pause the video and write a quick program to see what the results are. And if you haven't been programming all these little vignettes on your own, you really should, because in addition to finding out about the topic at hand, it's giving you practice through repetition of creating the body of the program. So the more you do it, the easier it'll be as class progresses. And believe me, this is really something you want to master early in the course. And you don't want to wait till week 5 and still be struggling with how to code up a simple class and main method shell. So pause the video here, write this up in a program without cutting and pasting, and just get the practice of doing it. Escape sequences are special char constants for hard to print characters such as the inner character or the tab character. And common escape sequences include new line, tab, print a double quote, print a single quote, and print a backslash. So say you wanted to print the following statement into tabbed column headings like the two lines below. How would you do this? Well, this is how you'd print it out. You have obviously the print line method right here, and then you have your tabs, which you can see with the /t. Let me get my pen out right here, and the /t here, and then new lines here and here. So this portion right here is considered to be a single character, and this backslash is the escape sequence. So it says, hey, whatever is after me is going to be a special case. So these are all treated as a single character, and you could store them in a char. And it's called an escape sequence because it's escaping the normal way that the compiler interprets the string. So an important concept for you to also wrap your head around is the difference between a primitive variable and a reference variable. So these are the two basic types of variables in Java, and almost everything you've seen up to this point has been a primitive variable type. Primitive variables hold only one piece of data, and here's some examples that you've seen: int, long, floats, etc. Reference variables, on the other hand, are more complex. They can hold a group of related data. We'll get more into reference variables later, but for now, understand that a string variable is a reference type. And it's easy to tell the two apart when reading code. Reference types start with an uppercase first letter because they're actually classes. And as we've already established, classes begin with uppercase letters. So let's take a look at some basic string manipulation statements. You can see an example of a declaration, initialization, and assignment here. And it's important to keep these terms straight. Remember, a declaration just states that you're going to be using a variable. An assignment just gives a variable a value. And initialization is when you do both of these in a single step. In addition to those, you can see here an example of a concatenation and a compound assignment operation. The same code, go ahead and trace it. Again, you need to get in the habit of doing this. You're inevitably going to have problems with your code at some point, and before you ask your help, I'm going to ask to see your program trace. And so pause the video, write out a tracing grid, and figure out what this is going to actually print out. And you should have gotten something that looks like this. You can see line 1 where we assign or declare the variable. We don't have any values in it, so we put a question mark. You can see on line 2 we initialize the string, so we say you can see the text right there. And then line 3 we assign a value to S1. S2 hasn't changed. In line 4 you can see that we add S1 to uSay and then store it in S1. And then line 5, you can see we do an assignment, a compound assignment operation where we concatenate all those things together. And so finally in line 6, you get the output. With strings being a class of their own, there's all kinds of useful methods that come with it being part of a class. Let's take a look at a few of them. First, there's the char at method, and it returns the character at a given in the given string at a specified position, with the first position being 0. This is called 0 index, and get used to it because most programming languages start counting at 0 instead of 1. And there's a reason for this, and we'll discuss it when we get into the topic of arrays. But for now, try to answer the following question, and take your time and think about it. What is the output in this example code? So you should have gotten that, right? Because the letter C is going to be 0, O is going to be 1, and W is going to be 2. So when we say last char, or char at 2, it's going to be the W in cow. So, and if you didn't get it, or don't trust this, or whatever, go ahead and write a quick program to test it out. Another method that you'll use often is the length method, and it returns the number of characters in a string. So take a look at the following code fragment. What is the output? Hopefully you got 2. And this is where it can be confusing, because when counting, you're counting the absolute number of items, so you don't start with 0. So for example, hi, there's 1, 2 characters. But the index, so if we say count, and then index, its index is 0, and its index is 1. So it can be a little bit confusing, but the length of the string here is 2, but the position of I would be 1. Hopefully that makes some sense. Another useful method is the equals ignore case method. And it allows you to compare strings together while ignoring the case in each letter. So take a look at the following code. What do you predict the output will be? Pause the video if you want to trace it or create a program to test it. I'll give you about 5 seconds before I get on to the next part. So if you actually run the program, what you're going to find is that the output is true, false, and true. But why? Because we've got new creature, which is equal to animal 1 plus animal 2, right? So that's going to concatenate the two to be horsefly. So new creature equals horsefly. Yes, it does, because we got both of these values capitalized, right? Boop, boop. The second line is false because we don't have these capitalized. And the third one is true as well because we are ignoring the case and we're saying we don't care if it's horsefly. It could be all caps horsefly. You know, whoops, helps if I can spell correctly. It doesn't matter. It just looks at the actual letter, whether it's uppercase or lowercase. So it's an extremely useful tool to use when comparing it. Note that you can't use equals. You can't say does new creature, trying to write here, new creature equal horsefly. That will not work, and we'll talk about that later. Okay, but for now, you need to make sure that you're using the dot equals or the equals ignore case when you want to compare two strings to each other. We've seen in our pseudocode examples or sections of code where we're prompting the user for information to be incorporated into the program. But how do we actually implement it? Well, that's where the scanner class comes in. Java ships with a pre-written class called scanner, and that allows us to get input from various sources. But in order to use it, we need to tell the compiler that we intend to use the scanner class since it's not part of our package. And we do that by using the keyword import followed by the package and class, and ending with a semicolon at the top of our program. Once our class is imported into our program, we can use that. And to do that, first we have to create a scanner object and initialize it like you see here. We have a type called scanner called standard in, and we're creating a new scanner object and we're using the system.in to initialize it. And you don't need to be worried about all of that right now. What you do need to worry about is memorizing this whole line. You can call standard in whatever you want. You can say user input or some other variable name, but the rest of it for now you need to memorize until you have a better understanding of class definitions. Once you have initialized the scanner object, and that's what we did right here, this is initialization, remember, because we have a declaration and an assignment, which altogether equals a initialization. Once you have that done, we can get information from the user and store it in another variable. Yep. So we do that by using the next line method of our standard in scanner object. So you can see here we are doing another initialization where we are declaring a variable called first name right there, and we're assigning it whatever is going to be coming from the command line. So this is going to wait for you to input something and hit enter. Once you do, whatever you input is going to get stored in the first name variable. So here's an example of the scanner being utilized. You can see we got the usual suspects here. We've got our header, we've got our public class, we've got our main method right here, but this is new. This is something we just added. This is our import statement to use the scanner class. And so pretty much like before, we have this constant called the speed of light, and we have it set to a certain value. And then we also have declared 2 additional doubles. And then we are we're initializing our scanner object standard in to be a new scanner that uses system.in. Then we print out to the user, hey, enter a cable length in meters, and we store whatever's input into the variable called cable length. Next, we do some math. We take whatever the user input and then divide it by the speed of light, and then print out the propagation delay. Okay, so let's take a look at what happens when we actually run it. So we'll compile it, which you can't see because it's off the screen, and then we'll run it, and we'll move our little console window over here. So you can see, please enter cable length in meters, matches exactly that. So we'll put in, we'll say 10,000 meters. So our propagation delay is going to be 3.3 e to the negative 5. So 0.00033. Okay, so that is how the scanner class works. You need to first create a scanner object, and we're going to talk much more about objects and classes in the coming weeks, so don't worry about it now. But again, you're going to need to get used to writing this out, so that's another foot stomp for the final exam. You should probably have this memorized on how to create a input based on the system.in. Okay, so scanner, standard in, new scanner, and then system.in as a parameter. Okay. The scanner class has lots of different methods to retrieve information from the console, and you're going to need to use the correct method depending on the type of results that you're expecting. So you've already seen an example of next line and next double, in which next line returns the entire line until a new line is found, and it stores it as a string variable. Next double will skip the leading white space until a token is found, and then it will return the token as a double value. What does that mean, token? Well, that just basically means that it's just going to find the next item, and it's going to the next series of characters until in between spaces, until you find blank space. So basically it's just going to find the next group of letters or digits. It's going to be up to you to make sure that the user inputs those digits correctly. You also have next, which will skip the leading white space until a token is found and return that token as a string value. Okay, notice that that's different from next line. Also, we have next int, which is similar to next double, and it skips the leading white space until it's found, and then it returns it as an integer. And of course, we have next long and next float as well. So you need to think about what you're asking the user to input and use the appropriate scanner class method to retrieve that information from the console. So to help clarify the whole token white space thing, here's what leading white space is. You see these strings of characters and digits. So that's the leading white space, and these are the tokens. Hopefully that should make it a little bit clearer. So let's take a look at another example where we use the standard input or the scanner class in a program. So here we have a simple program where we are going to just ask the user for their first and last name. So you can see here we got a first and last name, and then we're going to prompt the user, and they're going to enter their first and last name, and it's going to print out their initials. So you can see also here that we are using the char at method of the string class. Same thing. So let's run it and see what happens. So here's my command prompt, and we'll go ahead and enter Corey, and we're going to add a bunch of extra spaces just to show you that the scanner will automatically disregard all of that white space. So you can see here I had a couple spaces here, I had a couple spaces here, but it still got my initials as CW correct. Okay, so that's how you can use that in your programs. So we talked about a lot in this unit. We introduced you to your first program. We talked about comments, file naming conventions. We talked about the main method and how to use braces to separate your code. We also talked about the print line function. We talked about compilation and execution of your Java program and what the process is. We also talked about program templates and how you can use that as a starter for all of your programs. We also talked about identifiers and the difference between classes and variable name identifiers. We talked about variables and assignment statements, initialization statements, and data types, covering the primitives, int, long, float, and double. And we also talked about constants and how to use them. Operators, how to evaluate expressions, the increment and decrement operators, compound assignment operators, typecasting, chars, escape sequences, the difference between primitive variables and reference variables, and we'll get more into that in the later units. We also talked about the basics of string manipulation. Looked at the methods called equals, ignore, case, length, and char at. Those are all very useful methods that you're going to use quite often. And then finally, we closed with a look at the scanner class. So this was a lot for this unit. I think the rest of the units are probably going to be about this length as far as videos. So go back, and if there's anything that you had questions on, make sure you write them down so you can bring those questions to class and we can clarify those answers for you. But in the meantime, I would recommend going ahead and getting started on your homework and doing a couple practice programs where you start from scratch and type out everything, the class, the program header or the preamble, the main method. If you don't know how to do that yet, you should probably practice that, because that is definitely something that is going to be testable. So hopefully this covered everything. In case you had any questions, again, just bring them into class. Thanks.